Today we're going to install the Fabtech 6-inch Dirt Logic lift kit on this 2019 new body style GMC Sierra 1500 4-wheel drive. Now this is the same install as the Chevy Silverado. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I've already gone ahead and disconnected the negative battery terminal. I got it up on a lift and got it supported. I removed the wheels and tires. Next, what I'm gonna do is focus my attention on this plastic skid plate. I've got 4 bolts holding that on, 1, 2, and then 2 on the opposite side. All right, we're gonna go ahead and remove these with a 13 millimeter. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and use that same 13 millimeter, remove these 2 bolts so I can drop this skid plate. All right, next we're gonna go ahead and take our tie rods loose. I'm on the passenger side using a 21 millimeter, gonna take that nut loose. We're gonna do the same thing on the driver's side as well. Now to get this tie rod dislodged, typically what you want to do is use a little mallet or a little mini sledge, hit the side of the spindle, and that should jar that loose. Next, what we need to do is go ahead and remove the sway bar end link from the lower control arm. Now, you're going to need to use an 18 millimeter to get that nut loose. I like to use an impact driver to get it off nice and quick. If you don't have an impact driver, you're going to have to use a socket along with a wrench to pull that apart. Once we've got that out of there, do that on the opposite side as well. Now we can go ahead and move our sway bar out from our lower control arm. All right, now we've got the sway bar end links disconnected from the lower control arms. We can go ahead and remove the sway bar brackets from the frame. We've got 2 bolts on each frame rail, and those are going to come off with a 10 millimeter. All right, now we're going to go ahead and take the sway bar, put it out of the way along with all the hardware. We're going to reuse all of that later. All right, now on both sides, driver and passenger side, every place where you have either ABS line or brake line, you're going to have brackets that hold things in place. Everything is there is going to be held in with a 10 millimeter bolt. So we got one here, here, we got them kind of all over the place. You just find all those, pull those out, save all the hardware for later. Next, what we're going to do is remove the caliper from the steering knuckle. We've got 2 bolts that hold that in place. We're going to pull those off with an 18 millimeter, and then we're going to hang that out of the way on the frame of the truck. Make sure you never hang it by the brake line itself. That can stress the brake line. All right, now we've got the caliper removed. I like to use a caliper hook and hook that in place right onto the frame of the truck. That keeps the stress off the brake lines. And go ahead and take your ABS cable and get that all out of the way as well. Do that on both sides. All right, next we're going to go ahead and remove the axle nut. Now that's going to require a 35 millimeter axle nut socket. Best to use a big impact with this. Repeat that on the opposite side. All right, next we're going to go ahead and use a T30 Torx bit to remove this bolt from our brake rotor hat. All right, now we're going to go ahead and remove the rotor and save it for later. All right, now we're going to go ahead and turn our attention to our upper ball joint on our upper control arm. We've got a nut that needs to come loose. You're going to use an 18 millimeter to break that loose. All right, now this truck is a brand new truck, and so that's probably the reason why it's coming loose by itself. But if your truck has some miles on it, you'll want to take a mini sledge and hit this spot right here to jar that loose. Hit a few times and it'll bust loose. Make sure you keep the nut on there while you're breaking it loose so it doesn't just pop away from it. So make sure you hit here, don't hit here, and don't hit here. Only hit this location right here. All right, now to keep this from springing out from underneath us whenever we're working, we're going to go ahead and apply pressure down and then finish pulling this nut off. And now we can go ahead and pull that loose. Let's go ahead and get the lower ball joint. All right, again, this is a brand new truck, so this did already go ahead and loosen up and drop down unseated from the ball joint. If you did have some miles on it, you would probably want to hit it right here until it busted loose from the bottom, and that unseats it. Make sure, again, that you have the nut on there as you lower it down so that it doesn't just drop off as you're breaking it loose. Now we're going to go ahead and pull this off of the axle once we pull this off with an impact. All right, next what we need to do is separate the hub assembly from the steering knuckle. We're going to take out these four bolts that we're going to use an 18 millimeter for that. So I'm going to set this down on its side so I can break them loose. All right, next we're going to go ahead and shoot a little bit of penetrating oil up into here just to get it nice and loosened up. Then we're going to go ahead and tap the hub assembly out of the steering knuckle. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and transfer the hub assembly over to our new steering knuckle. All right, next we're going to go ahead and apply some thread lock to the factory hardware and torque them down to 125 foot-pounds. All right, now I'm going to do the same thing to the driver's side and set my steering knuckles aside for later. All right, next we need to go ahead and remove the factory strut. The way we're going to do that is first from the bottom, we need to remove these two bolts. Those are going to come out using a 15 millimeter from the bottom of the lower control arm. All right, now we got 3 nuts that are holding the strut in place at the very top. You can't see the one in the back, but what we're going to have to do is pop loose some of the stuff that's in the way so we can get those off of there. There's also a cap along the back side with a wire attached to it. That's actually just holding that wire in place. It's attached to the rear one. So we're going to pop all that stuff loose. We're going to remove these nuts with an 18 millimeter. Once we've done that, we're also going to remove the strut from the opposite side. Next, we remove both of our lower control arms. Those are held on by factory bolts going through. You're going to use 27 millimeter hardware to take out the front and rear bolts on each side. And make sure you retain all of that stuff for reinstallation later. All right, next we're going to go ahead and remove where the differential connects to our crossmember. We're going to use a 21 millimeter socket and wrench to remove that, hold on to that hardware. All right, now we're going to go ahead and remove the cross member. I'm going to use 18 millimeter wrench and ratchet and go ahead and pull out these 2 bolts here on the driver's side, then go to the passenger side, do the same thing. All right, now we're going to go ahead and turn our attention to the rear differential where it attaches to the drive shaft. We're going to disconnect the drive shaft. We've got 6 bolts holding the drive shaft to the differential. We're going to break those loose with a 10 millimeter and pull them all out. All right, make sure you save that factory hardware as we will be reusing it. Okay, on the front of the differential, we need to unplug the electrical harness. Go ahead and pull that off and set that off to the side. Then we'll move to the top of the differential and unplug the ventilation tube. All right, now we're on the passenger side. Before we can disconnect the differential from the frame with this bolt right here, we actually need to move this actuator so that bolt can slide out. In order to do that, we've got a little bolt right here for the actuator. We're going to pull that out with a 10 millimeter and move the actuator out of the way. All right, we're going to use a 21 millimeter on the front side of this bolt and also on the back side. Now let's move to the driver's side and break that bolt free as well. All right, now on the driver's side, this is where your bolt's going to be to hold in the differential. We're just going to go ahead and break that loose for right now. Then we're going to support the differential and then pull out both of those bolts so we can lower down that differential safely. Okay, so now once I pull this bolt out, all of the way the differential is going to be on top of my supports. So double check, make sure the supports are in the right spots and you're getting plenty of support there. All right, now we can go ahead and lower the supports down and pull the differential out of the way. We may have a wire that needs to be undone from the differential as we go down. Okay, this is the location where the differential ventilation tube came off. We also had the differential harness that ran down here and plugged in. We had a couple of Christmas tree fasteners with wire ties that held that in place, one right here and one right here. Now I will say it's probably a little bit easier to lower the differential down a little bit, gain better access to this. Otherwise, you're having to fight this stuff in very tight quarters. All right, so now on the driver's side rear cross member, I've already gone ahead and measured 2 inches in from the edge on both the front side and the back side. And I'm going to use a Sawzall to cut that material off. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and clean that up with a grinder and put a little bit of black spray paint on it to seal it off. All right, now back over here on the passenger side, I'm going to take this actuator and slip it back into place and reattach the factory bolt that came out. All right, and the differential was disconnected from this mount right here. What we're going to do is we're going to put a new bracket for the differential to reconnect to up against that mount. What we're going to use is, out of our hardware kit, is a 120 millimeter M14 bolt with an M14 washer. That's going to go through the bracket and through the mount. And on the other end, we're going to put another washer along with an M14 nut. Now we're just going to leave this loose for right now. We'll come back and tighten it later. All right, now over here on the driver's side, this is where the differential was attached. We've got a differential drop bracket for the driver's side as well. That's going to go up into that location. We're going to take the factory bolt that came out, we're going to put it right back through. Once we get that lined up, we're going to tighten it down. And then we can mark a spot up underneath here where we're going to drill a hole. Next, what we're going to do is hold the bracket flat up against the bottom of the frame and go ahead and tighten down this bolt. All right, now we're going to go ahead and take a silver Sharpie and mark this location. Now we can go ahead and drop this bracket back out of place and drill a 1/2 inch hole. All right, now we're going to go ahead and step that hole up to a 1/2 inch. Okay, I've already gone ahead and sealed this off with some paint so it doesn't rust. Now I'm going to go ahead and explain to you this nut tab. Since the bracket's not there, you can see it a little bit with the camera angles. This nut tab, what it's going to do is go through this open hole in the frame, come down, and then we're going to line up where that nut tab is over top of the hole that we drilled. And now I'm just going to leave that there. We're going to go ahead and take our new bracket, set it into place, put the factory bolt back through. We're going to go ahead and put that in there hand tight. We're not going to tighten it down all the way yet. Now in our kit, we've got a bolt with a flat washer and lock washer that's going to go up through and into that nut tab. All right, now we've got both of these lined up. We're going to tighten this one down to 106 foot-pounds. We're going to tighten this down to 148 foot-pounds. All right, now we're going to go ahead and raise up the differential very carefully, make sure it's well supported. We're going to line up this bracket first, run the hardware through there, and then raise up this bracket. We're going to have to tilt it at an angle to line up here, then we can run the hardware through that one. Okay guys, just to let you know, I did have to do a little bit of trial and error to get all this stuff to fit up. In the end, I did have to remove the bolt holding the bracket from the frame so I could line it up to this bracket here, put the hardware through there, and then put the bolt back through the frame. Now I can go ahead and put on my washer and lock nut just finger tight. Now I'm going to go ahead and install my washer and lock nut finger tight on this one. All right, now we're going to go ahead and lift up our rear cross member. Now, as we line it up to the frame mount, we're going to also make sure that our differential lines up to the mount on the cross member. Line that up. Go ahead and use the included hardware. Slide it all the way through. And hand tight put on the other hardware on the opposite side. Make sure you do that on both sides. All right, now we're going to go ahead and raise up this differential mount. We're going to use our factory hardware, put it back through there, and we're going to tighten that down to 97 foot-pounds. We're going to go to our cross member hardware and tighten that down to 148 foot-pounds on both sides. All right, now we can go ahead and tighten down the differential to the differential bracket here on the passenger side and also on the driver's side. We're going to bring that to 97 foot-pounds. Then we're going to go up here on the passenger side and tighten down the differential bracket to the frame, bring that to 148 foot-pounds. All right, now we're going to go ahead and reattach the front drive shaft. We're going to use the factory hardware. We're also going to use thread lock. We're going to tighten this down to 53 foot-pounds. All right, now we're going to go ahead and install our front cross member. This lines up to the front lower control arm location. We've got M18 hardware that's going to go through the holes once we get them lined up. And then attach the nuts and washer on backside as well. All right. There's the washer and the provided lock nut. Leave it loose and do the same thing on the opposite side. All right, next in your kit, you're going to have a couple of bolts that are 7/16 bolt. We're going to put them through these holes in the cross member. They're kind of difficult to get to a little bit. It's not too bad. Slide those through like so. And then with those sticking out, what we're going to do is take our skid plate and slide it over top of those bolts. Once that skid plate is in place, we'll take the rest of our hardware, which is going to be a washer and a nut on each one of those bolts. Put the hardware onto those bolts. Then once we get that connected, we'll go and line up the back end as well. All right, now we're going to have a nut plate that's going to slide into the rear cross member on the driver's side over here. We're going to line it up to that hole that's in the bottom of the driver's side cross member. We're also going to take this 1/2-inch bolt, go through the skid plate along with its washer, and then line up to that hole. Once it goes through there, line it up to the nut and get it started. Okay, now to tighten down this hardware, we're going to need 11/16 wrench or ratchet on the nut end, and then a 5/8 inside the cross member on the bolt end. Go ahead and tighten all that down. Now we can go ahead and tighten down the rear with a 3/4. All right, now here is the passenger side sway bar drop bracket. You'll have a stamped number in there, but another way to identify it is you've got the 90-degree angle on the inside of the gusset that goes to the sway bar, and the other angle goes to the frame of the truck. Also, the inside is going to face the inside of the vehicle. So we're going to use the factory hardware, reinstall it to the frame, but don't tighten it down just yet. We're going to do this on both driver and passenger side where we install the sway bar brackets. All right, now with the sway bar bracket hand tight attached to the frame, we're going to use some of our provided bolts. We've got a bolt with a flat washer. It's going to go up through the sway bar and into the sway bar bracket. Then once that goes on top, we're going to put another flat washer along with a nut in place. We're just going to put it on there hand tight for right now. We're going to do that on both sides. We won't be tightening down the sway bar until it's down on the ground with some pressure on the suspension. Okay, for the front and rear cross members, you're going to have M18 hardware on the driver and passenger side that we put through. I've already kind of got it snugged up, but we're going to go ahead and bring all 4 of those down to 229 foot-pounds. Now we can go ahead and reconnect our differential breather tube and also reconnect our electronics at the bottom. All right, next we're going to go ahead and reattach the factory lower control arms to the lower control arm mounts on the cross members. Now, the way that goes on, if you did not pay attention to how that came off, this is part of the cam bolt assembly right here. What you're going to do, you're going to notice you've got a hole in one side of the cam lock. What that's going to do, that's going to thread onto, or not thread onto, it's going to press onto the peg coming out of the cross member. And then we're going to line this hole up to the hole in the cross member. Now, when we put our lower control arm up into that cup, we're going to push this bolt back through, make sure that it's lined up to the hole on this side, and also make sure this peg slides through the other side of the cam bolt and then put on the factory hardware. If you didn't see how they came off, the front cam bolts face towards the front and the rear cam bolts face towards the rear as the bolt goes through. We're going to do this on both sides. All right, now we're going to go ahead and lift our lower control arm up into place. And once we get everything lined up, we're going to put the factory cam bolts back through. One thing I also want to mention is make sure the sway bar is positioned above your lower control arm. Reattach the factory nuts, but do not tighten it this time. All right, now we're going to go ahead and install our Dirt Logic coilover. Now you can already tell this is not centered, it's off center. So what we're going to do is we're going to set it to where it's offset towards the rear of the vehicle. Also, this is the same shock as what's on the other side, so it's drilled for either side. So you can put this in backwards, so take note of that. Up top, we've got some threaded holes that we're going to be going into. So I'm going to drop one of our bolts with a washer and lock washer down through this hole in the frame cup up at the top. And I'm going to line it up to this rear hole and start threading it in there. All right, once we've got those threads started in, we're going to go ahead and put in the other two, also using the red thread lock that's provided. All right, now before we tighten those up at the top, we're going to go ahead and raise up our lower control arm, and we are going to rotate the bottom end over to our lower control arm. Now, you may have to straighten up that bottom end. Looks like it's lined up okay for me though. If you do have to straighten that to line it up to the lower control arm so it goes in nice and straight, what I like to do is take both of the bolts and I can put them in through the bottom. Once they're in through the bottom, I can twist on this and rotate the angle of the lower seat so it lines up properly. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate this up. This is lined up pretty well. Now, one thing you will notice, I do have the sway bar up above this angle. You want to make sure you do that before you tighten this up, otherwise you have to take it back apart. All right, another way to correct the pitch on this so it lines up better is just use a crescent wrench and then push down and twist that and see if it lines up a little bit better. And that definitely looks like it's going to be okay. We're going to go ahead and push our bolts down through the lower control arm. At the bottom, we'll meet that with the provided washer and lock nut. All right, now we've got 11/16 on the bottom and a 5/8 on the top. We're going to go ahead and bring this down to 70 foot-pounds on each side. All right, now up top, we're going to bring these bolts with a 9/16 to 44 foot-pounds. All right, repeat the same process on the opposite side. All right, now once that is done on the opposite side, we can go ahead and put our sway bar end link down into our lower control arm and replace the factory nut. Don't tighten it down at this time. All right, now we can do that to the other side as well. Now we're going to go ahead and install our new steering knuckle. Before we slide that in place over top of the axle, we need to put the axle spacer in place. Slide that into the steering knuckle like so. And lift it up into place. Also make sure you're getting onto the bottom of the lower control arm. Once you've got that where it's supposed to be, where the ball joint bolt is going through the bottom of the steering knuckle, lift that up and put the factory nut in place just to catch a few threads. We can go ahead and get the axle in place going through the center of the hub assembly. And while we're putting this in place, make sure that our spacer stays centered onto the hub assembly. All right, now we're going to go ahead and step the axle nut in place. Just get the thread started. That way we won't have to worry about anything backing out. All All right, once we've got that in place, we're going to go ahead and line up the steering knuckle to the upper control arm and push down the upper control arm to line it up to the steering knuckle and put the factory nut in place onto that as well. Get some threads started. And now we're going to go ahead and torque this one down to 37 foot-pounds. And the bottom ball joint we're going to tighten down to 87 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to go ahead and tighten up my axle nut first with this, then I'll snug it down to 177 foot-pounds with my torque wrench. All right, next what we need to do is replace our old tie rod end with a new tie rod end. The steering knuckle is in a completely different location, and so they have to realign everything for that. So what we're going to do is first install our Zerk fitting. Just thread that on nice and tight, finger tight, and we're going to go ahead and grease that up before we install it. All right, next we want to go ahead and break this jam nut loose. The way we're going to do this is put a crescent wrench on our tie rod, hold that in place, and take a 24mm wrench and break it loose just like that. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and move my steering knuckle out of the way and unthread my tie rod end from the tie rod. Now, even though we've got a shorter tie rod end, this tie rod shaft is still a little bit too long. So what we need to do is measure up 3/8 of an inch and cut 3/8 of an inch off. The way I like to do that is rotate this nut down and use that to measure. Measure 3/8 of an inch. All right, now I went ahead and put it kind of tight in position with a bungee cord so it doesn't move around on me. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut off everything that is highlighted in silver. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and clean this up with a grinder. Once we give that a little bit of time to cool off, we're going to go ahead and run that nut back down the threads. All we're doing here is making sure the threads on the end are nice and cured. We're just going to pull this nut across that, make sure there's no burrs. And then we can go ahead and put the nut back in place and thread on our new tie rod end. All right, now I've already gone ahead and put on a little bit of anti-seize lubricant. Now I'm going to go ahead and line up the threads and thread on this new tie rod end. All right, I've gone ahead and removed my bungee. Once I threaded this all the way up the shaft, I rotated it back down to where it's straight up and down, and I went ahead and snugged up my jam nut. Now I'm going to go ahead and lift it up and put it through the spindle. This is just going to be my temporary setting. I probably still need to adjust for my alignment. Once we get that in place, we're going to go ahead and tighten this down to 44 foot-pounds. Now we're going to go ahead and reinstall the factory rotor. And we're going to reinstall the set screw. Because these things are so infamous for freezing up, I went ahead and put some anti-seize on there. I think it's just a good practice. We're going to tighten that set screw down to 20 foot-pounds. All right, now we can go ahead and reinstall our factory brake caliper. Once we get both of the bolts lined up, we're going to pull them out one at a time, put some thread locker on them, and then tighten them down to 70 foot-pounds. All right, now for our brake lines, we got the back side of the steering knuckle we're looking at. This bracket right here is going to line up to this hole in the knuckle. So we've got a provided bolt with a lock washer. We're going to go through that. Once that gets lined up, we're going to tighten that down. We're going to use a 7/16 wrench or ratchet to tighten that down. All right, now we're on the other side of the steering knuckle. We can go ahead and reconnect our speed sensor. I'm going to use the factory hardware and tighten that down with a 10mm. Now we're going to go ahead and zip tie this out of the way, make sure it's nice and secured. Now we're going to repeat the exact same process on the opposite side. When we're done with that, we can move to the rear. But let me let you know, the front is not complete. When the rear is done, we'll go ahead and put the wheels and tires on, drop the truck down onto the ground with the weight of the truck resting on the suspension. We can go ahead and go up underneath there and tighten down our cam bolts and our sway bar to proper torque specs. All right, now we're on the passenger side in the rear. What we're going to do is focus on this rear bump stop. Now we're going to do the same thing on the driver's side. What we got to do is pull this off. We've got a 10mm head bolt that's up in there, so we're going to get a 10mm, slide it up in. We're going to break that loose. All right, next we're going to take our included 70mm M10 bolt. It's going to go up through our bump stop. All right, we've also got a bump stop spacer that's going to go through, and then we're going to put a little bit of thread locker on the end of it. All right, we're going to tighten that in place with an 8mm Allen wrench. Now I've gone ahead and supported the rear axle from underneath. Next, we want to go ahead and remove the shocks from both sides. We've got a 21mm on each side here. Got a wrench and a ratchet. I'm going to go ahead and pull that off. All right, since we're right here, we got to go ahead and remove this shock anyway. We've got a 21 up at the top. Go ahead and take that off. Yeah, you can go ahead and remove the driver's side one as well. All right, now we need to go ahead and lower the axle. Before we can do that, we're going to go ahead and loosen up the U-bolts and get those free from the spring. That way we can slowly lower it down. Again, make sure that you have this axle supported from the bottom before you start doing this. We're using 21mm. All right, now it might be helpful also use a little bit of penetrating oil. Get these threads to move nice and easy. All right, now we're going to retain this for later. We're going to discard our old U-bolts and hardware. Do the same thing on the opposite side. All right, next we're going to go ahead and start lowering the rear axle. Now we're going to do that nice and slow to keep an eye on everything. Also, we want to gain access to our brake line brackets up top. We need to take those loose as well. All right, now before we install our lift blocks, it's going to be a good idea to go ahead and take loose our bracket that holds our brake lines to the differential. We've got 3 bolts we're going to use a 13 millimeter to do that. This way we don't stress those brake lines as we lower this axle.
All right, now make sure you retain your factory hardware because you will be reusing it.
Okay, now on the top of the differential, we've got our brake line bracket pulled away, but if I lift up on that, I'm not going to lift up high enough to be able to fit my brake line bracket extension in there. So this line right here is going to stop me. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out this bolt and this bolt right here so I can free up that line and get it free from this area here. I'm going to put those bolts back in. Make sure that any of your hard brake lines especially are secured properly though. All right, I'm going to use a T40 to remove these. All right, now this brake line right here is going through a little plastic clip. I need to break it free from that plastic clip so that I can pull it out and away like so. Now I can go ahead and reattach my hardware. This allows me to move this up and down more freely. Now on the passenger side, what I'm having to do on this truck is we've got one of the clip that I pop loose with this brake line and also the one up top where it attaches to the bracket. That way I can lift this up enough to get my brake line spacer bracket in place. All right. And now that we've got this in place, what I'm going to go ahead and do is just temporarily put in our factory hardware and just put that in there finger tight for right now. I just want that in place. We'll go back and tighten that down later after everything else is done on the rear. Okay guys, real quick, I want to let you know these brake lines that were coming off the differential going up to the frame on the driver's side, I was noticing they were starting to get stressed as I was lowering that down. So I went ahead and removed the two bolts to hold this bracket to the frame. That's done with a 13 millimeter. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish lowering that down. All right, now we're back at the passenger side lift block. Both lift blocks are the exact same, so just go ahead and grab one. What you will notice is on the bottom of the lift block, you got a locator that's going to drop into a hole into the axle mount. You'll also have front stamped into the bottom. That it gives you the direction of which way that's going to face. Now I'm just going to go ahead and drop that into the axle mount with the locator pin, and we'll also have a locator pin on the leaf spring that's going to drop into that lift block. So I'm going to bring that back and then slowly rotate this back up. Might be helpful to have a friend help you line everything up. All right, now we're going to go ahead and drop the U-bolts in place. And we're going to reinstall the factory mount. Once that's in place, we're going to use provided hardware. We've got 9/16 washers along with nylock nuts. Now we're only going to be able to get this by hand up to the end of the nylock. We're going to do that on all four of them here. Okay, next what we're going to do is go ahead and snug up these bolts. We're not going to tighten them down. We're just going to get them to the where they just start to connect using a 7/8. All right. Next, we're going to repeat that same process on the opposite side. All right, now we're going to go ahead and attach our brake line brackets to our extensions. In our kit, we've got bolt with washer, goes up through the bottom. Then on top, we'll do another washer with a lock nut. We're just going to line all this stuff up for right now. All right, now we've got all that lined up, we're going to tighten down our supplemental hardware along with our factory hardware. All right, now before we install our rear shocks, we need to first install our bushings and our sleeves. Now, you can use a little bit of grease to make it a little bit easier, but these actually do just kind of pop in real quick and easy. Once that's in, flip it around to the other side, pop the other one in. Once that's in, just take your sleeve and work that through the bushing. Now, once that end is installed, we'll do the exact same thing to this end down here. Same opening, same bushing, same sleeve. Repeat the same process on the opposite shock as well. All right, now we're going to go ahead and install our Dirt Logic rear shocks using the factory hardware. Both shocks are going to install the exact same way. Now that we're done, we're going to go ahead and install our brand new wheels and tires, drop this thing down on the ground. We're going to bounce it up and down a little bit to settle the suspension. Once that's done, we can go ahead and tighten everything down to spec. Don't forget, go ahead and reinstall that brake line bracket to the driver's side frame, and then take this thing directly to an alignment shop to get the alignment done. That concludes the installation. If you have any questions, call the experts or visit us online.